We have some concerning reports from Capcom. People are crunching hard before launch, and there is a question in everybody's mind. Are they going to fix the atrocious performance issues in this game? The minimum requirements were super controversial when they came out, and for good reason, where they essentially required you a 1660 Super, that's my graphics card, by the way. I am barely in the minimum, to run the game at 30 FPS, and what they don't say here, quality upscaling. What is that fancy thing, okay? It means that the game is supposed to run at 720p and then get upscaled by your graphics card. So basically, this is the minimum requirements for 30 FPS 720p. And the recommended requirements were 60 FPS, but only if you did frame generation. Frame generation meaning that you will run the game at 40 or 30 FPS, and your graphics card will come up with the 20 extra FPS with like some AI thing that Nvidia has now. Now Nvidia said themselves that this is not how this works, that you need at least 60 FPS to be able to get any benefit from frame generation. Frame generation was designed for high-end computers with like super high refresh rates to make the video a lot smoother, not to make a game that runs poorly run well. That's not what it's made for. And honestly, I tried playing with frame generation and the counter would say 60 FPS. It did not feel any smoother. Like, if the only frame generation I got is this game, I am not gonna use it. But very well, okay, that's not the news of today, that's just the little preamble of me complaining for a while. Most people are not gonna be able to run the freaking game. Now, the second part of the context that you need to understand this before we get into the actual news is that they did say there were some performance improvements, and that's just common sense, you know. Over time they optimize the game, if not ready now, and then like at the very end of the game they try to improve the performance a little. And the part that got everybody mad is that these performance improvements they talked about, they said, please bear in mind that these improvements, including performance, are not gonna be reflected in the second beta that is coming this February 6th. So we are not gonna see the improvements in performance until, well, the game comes out. So you got the minimum requirements, you think you can run the game, you buy it, and you don't know if it's gonna run well or not. Granted, it is hard to believe the game is gonna run any worse than it did, and I get it. When a game is on like a beta build, not everything is gonna run well. We found a lot of the problems with the game over time, like they put way too many polygons on some boss models. That's unnecessary, and that has a simple fix enough. You just gotta fix the models, but that's gonna take time, and we don't know if they're gonna do that. They probably will, but we don't know that. And that takes us to today's news. This is from IGN themselves, who had a lot of inside info on the company because they had a bunch of exclusive news over Monster Hunter Wilds these last few weeks. And they say confirmation comes from the official German Monster Hunter Twitter account, which issued a follow-up statement that revealed Capcom is also exploring the possibility of releasing a standalone PC benchmarking tool. Now, Capcom said that was a translation error, but there were rumors basically that they would make some sort of like demo version of the game that you could test before buying the game, so you could see if it could run on your computer or not. We also plan to release a standalone free hardware benchmark tool. That is what they said. Apparently they are trying to backpedal on it. I don't know if it's gonna come out or not. You know, worst case scenario, you can refund it on Steam, you know, like if it doesn't run the way it's supposed to on day one, you can refund it, and that's what it's for. But it would have been pretty handy for a game with performance issues to be able to demo it first. Capcom recommends an Nvidia GTX 1660 Super or AMD Radeon yada yada for 30 FPS at 1080p. Now this is a lie, because this minimum requirement is also detailed as requiring an internal resolution of 720p and upscaling the graphics using DLSS or FSR using the lowest graphics setting. So upscaling with your graphics card, basically. I made an entire video on optimizing the game on the beta. It's probably buried somewhere there. I'm gonna link it in the description, I guess. We tried a bunch of the upscaling features. Or to be honest, the upscaling is like the part I am the least mad about, because upscaling is deceptively good for what it is. Not that it should get to this point that you need to use it, but it is decent. Frame generation though, complete hogwash, it doesn't do anything, do not enable it. Monster Hunter Wilds recommended settings are also target 1080p, 60 FPS with upscaling and frame generation, using the examples of RTX 2070 Super, RTX 4060, or AMD RX 6700 XT. Out of the three, and this is the important part, right? Only the RTX 4060, which is the new graphics card from Nvidia, are the ones that got the new AI frame generation. So everybody else has to use the crappy frame generation from AMD that is, well, I tried it, it's pretty crap, FSR3. It doesn't work, okay? It doesn't freaking work. That's all you gotta know about that. Targeting at 60 FPS with frame generation isn't ideal, with Digital Foundry recommending a baseline of 40 FPS. Basically, the way that the frame generation works is that your graphics card takes the two frames in between each other and it kind of averages it out with some AI thing to make up a new frame in between the two. But the problem is that if there is not a lot of frames, the graphics card doesn't know really how to make a new frame in between. So it's janky, there is artifacts, it's blurry, it's a glitchy mess, basically. It doesn't do anything. During the Monster Hunter Wilds beta test, PC players with lower end hardware struggled even with mid-range graphics cards like the 3060, and he's talking about the origami bug, where basically the monsters randomly turn into triangles sometimes if your graphics card has to load too many polygons. Once again, the polygon count is like way unnecessary. And a 3D model is made out of tiny triangles, they call them polygons, and the amount of those polygons that make the 3D shape of the character is the poly count. Now, most of the monsters in Monster Hunter Wilds got like 250,000 polygons, which is absolutely insane. And most of those polygons are unnecessary. They are just like a little dimple here and there, you know, like unnecessary detail that you cannot even tell. Especially if you gotta upscale 720p to even run the game, because it has so many polygons. It kind of beats the purpose of putting so much detail in it if you gotta run everything at minimum anyway, right? So that's what he's getting at here with the LOD bug. I don't even know what low LOD bug means, but low draw distance, okay. Monster Hunter Wilds is built on the Resident Evil engine, which first debuted in 2017's Resident Evil 7. That's the one with the vampire lady that pulls you over, you know, dreamy game. The engine was used in games like Devil May Cry, Monster Hunter Rise, and Street Fighter 6, with slick performance across all platforms, but all that glitters is not gold for the RE engine, as its bigger open world titles with more NPCs and enemies like Dragon's Dogma 2 have suffered from performance woes on consoles and PC, setting up a worrying portent for... Portent? What are you, a lawyer? A worrying portent, said nobody ever, for Monster Hunter Wilds, with the clock ticking towards an early February open beta and a late February launch. Capcom's claim of attempting to reduce GPU requirements could be key for the title's success on PC. Now, they have claimed before that they did fix some of the performance issues. They improved frame generation, which again, I am not a big believer in that one, because that's asking for sorcery. You cannot frame generate from 30 FPS. That's not how the technology is supposed to work. Even if it got a little better, that's not what it's supposed to do. But overall, the conclusion for all y'all that are very concerned about performance, like everybody is, even people with good computers is that yes, most likely, almost guaranteed basically, is that there will be some performance improvements before the game comes out. Some. We don't know what it's gonna look like, but we can also imagine that it's not gonna be miraculous. The thing is that in the beta, even people with the recommended settings could not run the game decently, and that's gonna be concerning. The launch date is not getting pushed back, not yet at least. It will be very unlikely they would do it now. So there is only so much they can do about it in, what was it, from the first beta to now, like 2 months, 3 months maybe they got to optimize the game. There were so many things that could trigger lag in the game. The spell effects, Ray Dow in particular, every time he would do a thunder attack, I would get like a massive lag spike. That is simple enough, and that's even something you can fix without doing much. You can just do like a toggle where you change the fidelity of that graphic, and you'll, like, I would rather have the spells look crappy and not freezing my game than trying to kill him and get lagging and dying. That's just me. The breakable environment, there was a bunch of like fancy technology where you can break rocks and stuff, and it looks super cool. And it turns out that there is an insane amount of polygons in those freaking rocks too, and they are loaded whether you're breaking the rock or not. they are probably also gonna look into simplifying that. There is probably some gains that can be made in there. The default settings of the upscaling are bad, and you can, if you customize the settings, you can get it to look okay. The upscaling is not as terrible as it may sound, even though we shouldn't be in the point with that we should need it. And once again, we shouldn't need it, but it can work decently if you change the settings. So another thing I bet they are gonna do is they are gonna change the default settings to something more similar to what I showcased on the beta that you can do. And yes, they are most likely going to simplify the models of the bosses. The lag is almost exclusively when you are fighting a monster. There is almost never lag when you're out in the open world or in the town or anything like that. It's only when you're fighting a boss monster that you get a lag for the most part. Even getting down the polygons to like 20%, which is not unreasonable if you look at the model. This right here is a Chinese player that found this. It's in Chinese here, but the part that you should care about, the part that you should look at is right here, this number, 414,086. That's the amount of polygons that is on the first boss that you get to see in the beta. The Toad boss, I forgot the name of the Toad boss, Toad guy. The Chatacabra, there we go, my bad, okay? This is the boss. Does it look to you like it has an insane amount of detail? Like, don't get me wrong, it looks fine on the promotional material, like it has a lot of polygons, but okay, 414,000 polygons, just so you can see how crazy this is. A character in The Last of Us had 70,000 polygons. An entire character with hair on it. Hair is like a bunch of polygons. Had only 70,000 polygons. Does it look to you, as good as it might look in here, does it look to you that this deserves to have 5 times more polygons? Where did the polygons even go? It turns out that every little scale on the monster's skin is a polygon. In any other game ever, they would have just painted it on the texture and nobody would have been able to tell the difference because it's a tiny scale. But in this game, every little one of these scales that you're seeing right here, that's like 7 polygons. Multiply that by the entire body of the monster and you can imagine, yeah, that's where all the polygons went. You can look at the tongue right there. The tongue has a bunch of extra polygons. Those protuberances at the tip of the tongue, those are polygons too. Did they really need to be there? I mean, it's more detail, but did they really actually need to be there to look good? That's what gives me hope that they probably will simplify some of the models because there is so much unnecessary detail that doesn't really affect how the monster looks that can be gone if you can just get somebody with a lot of time and patience to fix it. Perhaps they could even do like 2 versions of the game, like a super high poly like the original model and a super low poly one, and you can just have you choose which one you want to download. That's the way I would do it probably. But yes, that's only scratching the surface. Of course, there is a bunch of engine issues and other stuff, but from my point of view, the main problem with this game is they put a lot of detail in things that do not need that much freaking detail. But there we go, these are the minimum requirements. Once again, you need a 1660 Super, 6GB of VRAM. That's exactly what I got, and I proven you can kinda run the game decently with it. But do you even have one of these? Because I don't think a lot of people are gonna have this. There is gonna be a lot of people left out, and that's kinda sad. Subscribe, join the Discord, and thank you for watching.